Today we're going to finish up chapter 29, so this will be 29.5 and 29.6. We'll finish this chapter up and then begin chapter 30 in the next few days. Okay, this is getting into a little bit more chemistry of the brain, not super in detail, but just a little bit more than last week. And this stuff is pretty cool. 29.5 and 29.6 are one of my favorite sections of this chapter, so I'm kind of excited about this. All right, new techniques improve our understanding of the brain. Today, scientists can study the brain without surgery, which is pretty cool. There are 3 common technologies that are used: CT scans, MRIs, PET. So CT uses X-rays to view structure. This is what a CT scan might look like. An MRI uses magnetic fields and radio waves to view structure. And then PET or PET just detects activity where glucose is used in the brain. So all of these scans look pretty cool, and it's awesome that we have the technology to be able to even do this. Changes in brain chemistry can cause illness. So different neurotransmitters relate to different functions. Some stimulate impulses, some prevent impulses. So again, here's our picture of a synapse happening. And again, these two are 2 totally different cells. They are not connected. But what causes a reaction in the other is these little tiny neurotransmitters that are located in here. When some stimulus causes them to be released, those receptors of this cell will then pick up on that and then cause something to happen. Abnormal levels of neurotransmitters can cause illness, so something like schizophrenia, depression. Those are all because of abnormal levels of neurotransmitters. So this is what a normal scan looks like. This is what a schizophrenic scan looks like. And this is a picture of a depressed brain. And this isn't something to take lightly. These are all like serious cases of imbalances. Drugs can alter brain chemistry as well, whether these are like prescribed drugs or illegal drugs. Addiction is the physiological need for a substance, and this could be like an actual drug type substance. So like an illegal drug can cause an addiction. Pornography, even though that's not necessarily like a physical drug that you like ingest or inhale, whatever, pornography is actually a form of addiction, because it causes certain dopamine levels in your brain to spike. And every time you need a higher level of dopamine to cause that spike. And that is actually an addiction as well. It's causing some sort of transmitter in your brain and causes an addiction. Tolerance occurs when more drug is needed to produce an effect. So for instance, the reason why people need higher concentrations of drugs or more drugs more often is because they build up a tolerance to that certain level. So for instance, if it takes, I don't know, however much of this drug to get you high, the next time it's going to take even more, and then even more after that, and then even more after that to like go over the threshold in order to produce that high. Pornography is the same way, like I mentioned. So it might be a really low level of pornography, and then the next time it might have to be a little bit higher to cross that threshold. Drugs might cause desensitization or sensitization. So desensitization is more transmitter, leads to fewer receptors, and then sensitization is less neurotransmitter, leads to more receptors. This little diagram here says that when the amount of neurotransmitter becomes abnormal, the adjacent neuron adapts. Stimulants cause more action potentials. So it may increase neurotransmitter in the synapse, may decrease the removal of neurotransmitter in the synapse. So this is an example of cocaine. Those little tiny blue things, they kind of look like birdies, like, you know, those birdies in badminton. That's what they're shaped like to me. But anyway, they're not actually shaped like that. They're just using a shape to distinguish, in this case, what cocaine is representative of. So again, this is a picture of a synapse going on here. These little purple dots are like normal ones. These cocaine ones will fit into that neurotransmitter. You can see the end has a little spherical shape, very similar to the purple one, so they can fit into those neurotransmitters. And that's how drugs work. They're fitting into transmitters where they're not technically supposed to go. These little purple ones are supposed to go there because those are the normal ones. However, if you do cocaine, then those ones can fit in there as well, and that's what produces the high. Depressants cause fewer action potentials. So here's a quick example. You've got coffee versus alcohol. Coffee is a stimulant, so that's causing more action potentials. Alcohol is a depressant. That's causing fewer action potentials. That's why coffee kind of gets you hyped up and maybe jittery. And then alcohol, on the other hand, is more of a depressant. It can calm you down, kind of cause you to be just like really, what's the word I'm looking for? It'll come to me, hold on. Mellow, I guess is the word I'm looking for. It may produce neurotransmitters that prevent impulses. It may even slow the release of neurotransmitters that generate impulses. So this is using the drug category of opiates, how these are actually a depressant and they cause fewer action potentials. All right, 29.6. The endocrine system and hormones. The endocrine system produces hormones that affect growth, development, and homeostasis. Oops. Hormones are super interesting, and we talked about them a little bit the other day, how they travel through your bloodstream, but we're going to get into more detail about hormones. So hormones influence a cell's activities by entering the cell or binding to its membrane. We saw the receptors in the other section last week. Remember, those hormones were depicted as little diamond shapes, and then they could fit into receptors that had that diamond shape and cause that cell to do whatever it was meant to do. The wrong receptor is not going to accept the correct hormone receptor. So basically, you have receptors that only accept certain hormones. Glands are organs of the endocrine system. Hormones are chemical signals that influence cell activities. Okay, they're produced by glands. They travel through the circulatory system, and then they affect the cell with matching receptors. We kind of touched on this, like I said, last week. Now we're getting into more detail. So here's that picture again of our bloodstream, that little diamond-shaped hormone. It only fits into the target cell with the correct receptor. Not this one. This is not a target cell because it does not have the correct receptor for that hormone. And that's how hormones travel all throughout your body, is because of the bloodstream. All right, there are steroid hormones and non-steroid hormones. Steroid hormones enter the cell. Non-steroid hormones do not enter the cell. So here's an example of both. This is a steroid hormone. This is a non-steroid hormone. So let's take a look at the steroid hormone first. So what's going on here? Well, the steroid hormone diffuses through the cell membrane. Remember, we talked about diffusion. It's traveling through the cell membrane. The steroid hormone binds to a receptor within the cell. So in this one, the receptor is inside the cell, and the steroid hormone can travel inside of the cell. There's a technical chemical reason why that happens. We talked about the lipid bilayer in cells. So cells have a lipid bilayer, right? And that steroid hormone can actually diffuse through because of that lipid bilayer, because it is also a lipid. The non-steroid hormone, however, binds to a receptor on the outside of the cell, causing something to happen. So let's go through this fully. Steroid hormone binds to a receptor within the cell. The hormone and receptor enter the nucleus and bind to the DNA. So you can see what's going on here. So we went from the steroid hormone entering the cell wall or the cell membrane, binds to the hormone receptor, and then that goes into the nucleus. And then the steroid hormone causes the DNA to make certain proteins. All right, now let's look at the non-steroid hormone. So this particular hormone is non-steroid. It's not actually entering the cell at all. It's just binding to this receptor, which is on the outside of the cell membrane. And then what happens when it binds is maybe it causes some sort of shape change. Somehow it's sending a signal. Most of the time it's a shape change in the receptor. Causes a change. And then the receptor stimulates a second messenger within the cell. That second messenger starts a series of chemical reactions in the cytoplasm, which remember is that like jelly-like substance all inside the cell. The chemical reaction happens, and then the second messenger reaction activates enzymes, and those are the activated enzymes. Endocrine glands secrete hormones that act throughout the body. There are many glands located throughout the body, so these are all your endocrine glands. You have your hypothalamus, pituitary gland, thyroid, thymus, adrenal glands, which are the ones that are located right there, those little guys. Pancreas, and then for girls, you have the ovaries. Males, you obviously have the testes. And then the hormones travel through the bloodstream to cells with, once this goes away, 1 second, matching receptors. There we go. The hypothalamus interacts with the nervous and endocrine systems. So your hypothalamus, it's showing a picture of that right here. It's that little tiny thing, the base of your brain. The hypothalamus is a gland found in the brain, a structure of both the nervous and endocrine systems. So this is a shared one between those two systems. It produces releasing hormones that are then sent to the pituitary gland. This is the pituitary gland right here. So you've got the hypothalamus, pituitary gland. Here's a blown up picture of it. Hypothalamus, pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is found below the hypothalamus in the brain, and it controls growth and water levels in the blood. Also produces releasing hormones sent throughout the body. Oops. Releasing hormones stimulate other glands to produce hormones. They allow glands to communicate with one another and are used in temperature regulation. So here's an example here. If you go outside in the middle of winter in a t-shirt, you're exposed to the cold. Your hypothalamus is then going to send a chemical signal to your pituitary gland, and then it's going to go to your thyroid. Then thyroxine goes all the way back, or thyroxine causes your body to warm, and then it goes all the way back in this loop, back to the hypothalamus to tell you, okay, you can stop producing thyroxine because we're warm again, or whatever, if you go back inside. That was just a quick example. Hormonal imbalances can cause severe illness as well. So abnormal hormone levels affect homeostasis. Hormonal imbalances might be treated with surgery or medicine. If you've ever heard of someone getting thyroid surgery, it's usually because there's a hormonal imbalance causing their thyroid to cause them illness, which is why they need surgery on it. I had a friend in high school who was super, super tall, and it was actually because he had a problem with his thyroid. He was 7 foot, I'm trying to remember, 7 foot, like 6 or something like that. He was like really tall, really, really thin. Was a really good basketball player, obviously. Couldn't run super fast though. He was just really tall. But he actually had to have his car like specifically modified for him because his legs were so long. But that was due to a thyroid problem, which caused him to grow really, really tall. Steroids, a pituitary tumor, or some prescription drugs can make the pituitary overactive and indirectly cause problems. So people who take roids, this can often cause problems, and usually, or oftentimes, they're severe problems. Okay, that is the end of chapter 29. So you guys have a worksheet to complete today. But if you have any questions on chapter 29, please don't hesitate to send me a message, email me.